Commander Zixathara stood on the bridge of the Meridian Dawn, watching the massive human fleet through the viewport with a mixture of awe and terror. The ships stretched across space like a metal constellation, each vessel bristling with weapons that could crack planets. She had seen human military might before, but never directed toward helping someone. Usually, when humans gathered in such numbers, entire star systems trembled. The communication panel chirped softly. Admiral Sarah Chen's weathered face appeared on the holographic display, her steel-gray eyes focused and determined. Behind her, the bridge of the UES Retribution buzzed with activity as officers coordinated the largest rescue operation in galactic history. "Commander Zixathara," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We're ready to begin the extraction. Your people have waited long enough." Zixathara felt her throat constrict with emotion. After 300 years of exile, after watching her species slowly die out on the barren world of Kepler 442c, salvation had finally arrived. And it came wearing the uniform of the Terran Defense Force. The irony wasn't lost on her. The galaxy feared humans for good reason. They were the newcomers who had shattered every established rule of warfare, diplomacy, and expansion. Where other species took millennia to develop interstellar travel, humans had done it in centuries. Where others built defensive fleets, humans built armadas that could glass entire worlds. Where others sought peaceful coexistence, humans demanded respect through overwhelming force. Yet here they were, mobilizing their terrifying war machine not for conquest, but for compassion. It had started with a single human merchant vessel, the Free Trader Odyssey, limping through space on failing engines. Captain Marcus Webb had been trying to reach the nearest spaceport when his ship's reactor began critical failure. The closest inhabited world was Kepler 442c, but everyone in the sector knew that approaching the planet was suicide. The hegemony had declared it a quarantine zone after the Zephyrian plague outbreak. Any ship that landed would be destroyed without warning. Captain Webb hadn't known about the quarantine. He only knew his ship was dying, and the planet below might offer salvation. When he landed in the abandoned spaceport of New Zephyr, he expected to find a thriving colony. Instead, he found Zixathara and the last 47 members of her species, slowly starving to death. The Zephyrians had been an advanced spacefaring civilization before the plague. Their technology rivaled that of the galactic hegemony, and their ships were works of art that danced through space with impossible grace. But the plague had been engineered specifically to target their unique physiology. Within months, billions had died. The survivors had been quarantined on their homeworld, forgotten by a galaxy that found it easier to pretend they no longer existed. Zixathara remembered the moment Captain Webb had stepped out of his ship. Humans were still new to the galactic community then, and she had never seen one before. He was shorter than most spacefaring species, stocky and solid where others were tall and graceful. His skin was dark, weathered by years of space travel, and his eyes held a keen intelligence that seemed to catalog everything he saw. When he realized what he had stumbled upon, those eyes had filled with something she didn't expect from an alien: genuine sorrow. "How long have you been here?" he had asked through his translator. 317 years, she had replied, no longer caring if this strange newcomer reported them to the hegemony. Death would be a mercy at this point. Captain Webb had been quiet for a long moment, studying the crumbling city around them. "And they just left you here? All of you?" "The plague was highly contagious. The hegemony couldn't risk it spreading. We understood their decision." But Captain Webb had shaken his head with fierce determination. No, this isn't right. Nobody gets left behind like this." He had stayed for 3 days, helping repair their failing life support systems and sharing his emergency rations. More importantly, he had listened to their stories, learned about their culture, and promised that he would return with help. Zixathara hadn't believed him. In 3 centuries of abandonment, hope had become a luxury she couldn't afford. But Captain Webb was human, and humans, she was learning, had a very different relationship with impossible odds. When he left Kepler 442c, Captain Webb had gone straight to Earth, not to the hegemony, not to the local sector government, but to the human home world. He had bypassed every diplomatic channel and protocol, walking directly into the office of Admiral Sarah Chen with recordings of the dying Zephyrian colony. What happened next had stunned the galaxy. The hegemony had expected a formal diplomatic protest at most. Humans were still newcomers, still learning their place in the established order. The smart move would have been to file a complaint with the Galactic Ethics Committee and wait for the slow machinery of bureaucracy to perhaps, eventually, do something. Instead, Admiral Chen had declared the quarantine illegal under human law and dispatched the Third Fleet to Kepler 442c. The response had been immediate and hostile. The hegemony's Second Enforcement Squadron had moved to intercept, confident that the young human military wouldn't dare challenge established galactic authority. They had been wrong. The Battle of Proxima Drift had lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the hegemony's most advanced squadron was floating debris, and every major power in the galaxy was scrambling to reassess their understanding of human capabilities. Admiral Chen hadn't even bothered with formal declarations of war. She had simply transmitted a message on all frequencies. Humanity does not abandon the helpless. Anyone who interferes with our rescue operation will be considered an enemy combatant. Now, 6 months later, the human fleet had arrived at Kepler 4422c in numbers that made even the hegemony's battle fleets look small. But they hadn't come for war. They had come to fulfill a promise made by a single merchant captain to a dying species. "Commander," Admiral Chen continued, "we've prepared temporary facilities on the hospital ship Mercy's Grace. Your people will have the best medical care we can provide while we work on a permanent solution." Zixthara found herself struggling with concepts her people had forgotten. "Admiral, we have no way to repay this debt. Our civilization is gone. We have nothing to offer humanity in return." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "Commander, Captain Webb told me something your people said to him. When the storm comes, the strong trees bend so they don't break. Humanity is still learning to bend. Maybe you can teach us." The human fleet moved with mechanical precision around the dying planet. Massive medical ships descended through the atmosphere while fighter squadrons established protective perimeters. Marines in environmental suits began the delicate work of evacuating the survivors, treating each Zephyrian with the care usually reserved for precious artifacts. Zixthara watched her people's faces as they were carried aboard the human ships. After centuries of despair, she saw something she had thought lost forever: hope. Not the desperate hope of the dying, but the genuine hope of those who dared to believe in tomorrow. As the evacuation continued, long-range sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. A hegemony fleet was approaching, their intentions unclear, but their timing ominous. Admiral Chen received the report with calm professionalism, but Zixthara could see the calculation in her eyes. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "Hegemony Battle Group 7 is requesting permission to enter the system. They cite concerns about quarantine protocols." Admiral Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. "Denied. This is a humanitarian operation under human authority. Any interference will be met with appropriate force." "Ma'am, they're transmitting legal precedents. They claim authority over this sector under Hegemony Charter 77 Alpha." "Legal precedents?" Admiral Chen laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Tell them humanity recognizes one legal precedent in this matter: the right of sapient beings to live. If they have a problem with that, they can discuss it with our lawyers. We call them torpedoes." Zixthara felt a chill run through her. She was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic politics, a species that simply refused to accept the established order. Humans didn't argue law or precedent or diplomatic nicety. They simply decided what was right and dared anyone to stop them. The hegemony fleet held position at the system's edge, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid provoking the humans. Zixthara realized they were afraid. The galaxy's most powerful military organization was afraid of the human response. As the last of her people were evacuated to the safety of the human medical ships, Zixthara found herself standing beside Admiral Chen on the bridge of the Retribution. Through the viewport, she could see Kepler 442c shrinking behind them, the graveyard of her civilization finally disappearing from view. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Admiral Chen considered the question carefully. "Now we find your people a new home, somewhere they can rebuild, grow, remember who they were, and decide who they want to become." "And if the hegemony objects?" The Admiral's eyes hardened. "Commander, let me tell you something about humanity. We've been the underdogs for most of our history. We know what it's like to be written off, abandoned, told we don't matter. We've also learned something important. The galaxy is big enough for everyone who deserves to be here." "And who decides who deserves to be here?" Admiral Chen's smile was fierce and proud. "We do. And we've decided that anyone willing to survive 300 years of abandonment without losing their dignity or compassion deserves a chance at something better." As the human fleet prepared for the journey to humanity's space, Zixthara reflected on the strange turns of fate. Her people had been saved not by the established powers of the galaxy, not by ancient alliances or careful diplomacy, but by a species that the galaxy barely understood and already feared. Captain Webb's promise had become humanity's commitment, and that commitment had moved fleets across the stars. She was beginning to understand that when humans owed you a favor, they didn't just pay it back. They transformed it into something larger, something that reshaped the galaxy itself. The journey to human space would take weeks, but for the first time in centuries, time felt like a gift rather than a burden. Somewhere ahead lay the impossible, a future her people had thought lost forever, delivered by the hands of aliens who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The human colony world of New Terra buzzed with activity as construction crews worked around the clock to prepare for the Zephyrian arrival. Zixthara stood in the observation deck of the orbital station, watching massive cargo haulers ferry building materials to the planet's surface. Below, an entire city was taking shape, where only wilderness had existed weeks before. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" Dr. Elizabeth Morrison stepped beside her, tablet in hand, showing the latest medical reports. 6 weeks ago, this was just empty land. Now look at it." Zixthara studied the human xenobiologist who had become her people's primary medical advocate. Dr. Morrison was small even by human standards, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had spent every waking hour since the evacuation studying Zephyrian physiology, determined to understand their unique biology and find ways to help them thrive. "Your people work very fast," Zixthara observed. "On Zephyr Prime, construction projects like this would take years of planning and careful environmental assessment." "Well," Dr. Morrison smiled, "humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When people need homes, we build homes. Everything else can be figured out along the way." Through the viewport, Zixthara could see the new settlement taking shape according to human efficiency rather than Zephyrian aesthetics. The buildings were functional, sturdy, and completely unlike the flowing organic architecture of her lost home world. Yet somehow, they felt like hope given physical form. "Dr. Morrison," she said carefully, "may I ask you something that has been troubling me?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Why are you doing this? Not just the medical care or the temporary housing, but all of this." She gestured at the growing city below. Your species has invested enormous resources in helping us. You've risked war with the hegemony, disrupted your own expansion plans, and diverted materials from your own colonies. What do humans gain from this? Dr. Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. You know, that's exactly what the Galactic Council asked Admiral Chen at the emergency session last week. Zixathera hadn't known about any emergency session. What did she tell them? She said that humans measure wealth differently than most species. We don't just count resources or territory or trade agreements. We count potential. Potential? Dr. Morrison turned to face her directly. Commander, your people survived 300 years of isolation without losing their culture, their dignity, or their compassion. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Most species would have either died out or become completely feral. You maintained libraries, schools, even art. You rationed food so that the children ate first. You kept hope alive when hope was the most expensive luxury in the galaxy. Zixathara felt her throat tighten. Those had been dark years, filled with impossible choices and daily reminders of how far they had fallen. That kind of strength, Dr. Morrison continued, that's not just admirable, it's valuable. Humanity is still new to the galactic community. We're making enemies left and right simply by refusing to follow rules we didn't help make. We need allies who understand what it means to survive against impossible odds. Before Zixathera could respond, the station's communication system activated. All personnel, this is Admiral Chen. We have incoming ships at the edge of the system. Unknown configuration, but they're broadcasting hegemony authorization codes. Dr. Morrison's expression grew serious. That's not good. The hegemony agreed to stay out of human space during the resettlement. They made their way quickly to the command center, where Admiral Chen was coordinating with both the orbital defense platforms and the surface installations. The main display showed 3 large vessels approaching at high speed, their sleek profiles unmistakably hegemony in design. Status report, Admiral Chen ordered as they entered. 3 heavy cruisers, ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Vasquez reported. They're refusing to respond to hails, but they're also not showing hostile intent. Weapons are powered down. Shields are at minimum. Time to intercept? 14 minutes at current speed. Admiral Chen studied the display with calculating eyes. Launch a fighter squadron for escort duty. I want them to know we're watching, but don't take any aggressive action unless they fire first. Ma'am, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship. It's addressed specifically to Commander Zixathera. All eyes turned to the Zephyrian commander. She felt a chill of recognition as she realized who might be calling for her. Put it through. The display shimmered and resolved into a familiar face. High Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony stared out at them with the cold dignity that Zixathera remembered from her youth. He had been old even then, before the plague, and somehow he had survived when so many others had died. Zixathera of the 7th House, he said formally. I greet you in the name of the survivors. High Counselor, she replied, struggling to maintain her composure. I thought all the off-world Zephyrians had died in the plague. Most did. 17 of us survived in various locations throughout hegemony space. We have been monitoring your situation with great interest. Admiral Chen stepped forward. High Counselor, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You're entering human space without authorization. Vextar's gaze shifted to the Admiral with barely concealed disdain. I am aware of where I am, Admiral. I have come to collect my people and return them to their proper place within the hegemony. The command center fell silent. Zixathera felt the blood drain from her face as she realized what was happening. After everything they had been through, after humanity's incredible rescue effort, the hegemony wanted to reclaim them. With respect, High Counselor, Admiral Chen said, her voice dangerously quiet, these people are free citizens under human protection. They're not property to be collected. The Zephyrians are subjects of the hegemony, Vexitar replied coldly. Their legal status was never in question. The quarantine was a temporary measure. Now that proper medical facilities are available, they will return to take their place in hegemony society. Proper medical facilities? Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her earlier kindness replaced by scientific fury. High Counselor, these people were abandoned on a dying world for 3 centuries. Where were your proper medical facilities then? Vexitar ignored her completely, keeping his attention on Zixthara. Commander, surely you understand that your people belong with their own kind. These humans, however well-intentioned, cannot provide what you need for long-term survival. We have prepared facilities specifically designed for Zephyrian physiology. Zixthara looked around the command center at the human faces watching her. These people had risked everything to save her species from extinction. Admiral Chen had defied the entire galactic order to fulfill a promise made by a single merchant captain. Dr. Morrison had worked tirelessly to understand Zephyrian biology and create treatment protocols that were actually helping her people recover. High Counselor, she said slowly, what guarantees do we have that the hegemony won't simply decide we're inconvenient again when the next crisis arises? The hegemony has learned from past mistakes, Vexitar replied smoothly. Proper safeguards will be in place. Like the safeguards that prevented our abandonment in the first place? Vexitar's expression hardened. Commander, you forget yourself. You are addressing a High Counselor of the hegemony. No, Zixthara said, feeling something break free inside her chest. I remember exactly who I'm addressing. I'm addressing a representative of the government that left my people to die. That wrote us off as acceptable losses. That didn't even bother to check if any of us were still alive until humans made it embarrassing for them to ignore us. Admiral Chen placed a gentle but firm hand on Zixthara's shoulder. Commander, the choice is yours and your people's to make. But I want you to know that humanity's offer stands regardless. You'll always have a home with us if you want it. The High Counselor's face twisted with disgust. How typical of humans to prey on the vulnerable with false promises. Admiral, your species has a reputation for breaking agreements when they become inconvenient. Admiral Chen's smile was sharp and predatory. High Counselor, let me be very clear about something. Humanity doesn't make agreements about people's freedom. We make commitments. And when we commit to something, we see it through to the end regardless of the cost. Even if it means war with the hegemony? Especially then. The tension in the command center was thick enough to cut. Zixthara realized that her decision would have consequences far beyond just her own people. The humans had already risked everything to save them. How could she ask them to risk even more? High Counselor, she said finally, I need to speak with my people before any decision is made. Very well, Vexitar replied. But understand, Commander, that this is not a request. The hegemony has legal authority over all Zephyrian citizens. If necessary, we will enforce that authority. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Admiral Chen turned to her tactical officer. What's the status of our defensive preparations? All orbital platforms are online, ma'am. The surface installations are at full readiness. But, ma'am, if the hegemony brings a full battle fleet, they won't, Admiral Chen said with quiet confidence. They're testing us. They want to see if we'll back down when faced with legal technicalities and political pressure. Will we? Zixthara asked quietly. Admiral Chen looked at her with eyes that held no doubt whatsoever. Commander, when Captain Webb made his promise to your people, he made it in humanity's name. We don't break promises, we don't abandon allies, and we sure as hell don't let bureaucrats steal people's freedom just because they have better lawyers. Dr. Morrison checked her tablet. Commander, we should get down to the surface. Your people need to hear about this from you before they hear rumors. As they prepared to shuttle down to the new settlement, Zixthara felt the weight of an impossible choice. Accept the hegemony's authority and return to a society that had abandoned them, or stay with the humans and potentially trigger a war that could reshape the galaxy. Looking out at the construction crews still working on the Zephyrian settlement, at the human medical teams caring for her people, at Admiral Chen coordinating defenses she might never need to use, Zixathera realized that the choice wasn't really about her people at all. It was about what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. One where the powerful could discard the inconvenient and reclaim them when it suited their purposes, or one where promises meant something and freedom was worth fighting for. The shuttle ride to the surface gave her time to think, but by the time they landed in the center of the new settlement, she already knew what her answer would be. The only question was whether her people would have the courage to choose the impossible alongside her. The community center in the new Zephyrian settlement was packed beyond capacity. Every surviving member of the species had gathered to hear Zixathara's report about the hegemony ships. The building itself was a testament to human engineering, constructed in just days to accommodate Zephyrian physiology while maintaining the structural integrity needed for quick assembly. Zixathara stood before her people, looking into faces that showed a mixture of hope, fear, and exhaustion. These were the survivors of 3 centuries of abandonment, the ones who had kept their culture alive when the galaxy had written them off as extinct. Now they faced another impossible choice. Elder Kendara, the oldest among them at nearly 400 years, raised her weathered hand. "Commander, what does the hegemony offer us if we return?" "Integration into hegemony society," Zixathara replied. "Medical facilities designed for our physiology, legal protection under hegemony law, and recognition of our status as citizens rather than refugees." "And what do the humans offer?" asked Kevun, one of the younger survivors who had been born on Kepler 442c and had never known their true homeworld. Zixathara gestured toward the windows where human construction crews were still working despite the late hour. "Freedom to choose our own path, partnership rather than subjugation, and a guarantee that we will never be abandoned again no matter what the cost." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. These were not easy concepts for a people who had spent centuries simply trying to survive. Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "If I may, I'd like to address some concerns about the medical care." She activated a holographic display showing detailed scans. "We've made remarkable progress understanding Zephyrian physiology. The genetic damage from the plague is repairable using human medical technology. Your people aren't just recovering, they're thriving." "But surely hegemony medical technology is more advanced?" Elder Kendara asked. "In some ways, yes," Dr. Morrison admitted. "But they also created the plague that nearly destroyed you. Human medical philosophy is different. We don't just treat symptoms. We adapt our technology to each individual's needs. Your people aren't a medical problem to be solved. You're individuals with unique requirements." Young Kevun stood up. "Commander, I have a question that might sound foolish, but I need to ask it. If we stay with the humans, are we still Zephyrians, or do we become something else?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. It was Admiral Chen who answered, having entered quietly during the discussion. "Son," she said gently, "identity isn't something that can be taken away or given by others. You are who you choose to be. If you choose to stay with us, you'll be Zephyrian citizens of human space. If you choose to go with the hegemony, you'll be Zephyrian subjects of their empire. The difference is in who gets to make the choices about your future." Elder Kendara studied the human admiral carefully. "Admiral Chen, please speak plainly. What will it cost humanity if we choose to stay? We are not naive about politics." Admiral Chen considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Elder, it will likely mean conflict with the hegemony. They've already made legal challenges to our authority here. If you choose to stay, they may escalate to economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or even military action. And you would risk all of that for 47 aliens who have nothing to offer in return? Admiral Chen's smile was fierce and proud. Elder, let me tell you what I see when I look at your people. I see a civilization that survived 300 years of abandonment without losing their compassion. I see individuals who rationed their own food so their children could eat. I see a culture that maintained libraries and schools when they could barely maintain life support. She paused, looking around at the assembled Zephyrians. What you have to offer isn't technology or resources or military might. What you have to offer is proof that sapient beings can endure anything and still choose to be good. That's worth any price the galaxy wants to charge. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These humans weren't just offering charity or temporary aid. They were offering something far more dangerous: true alliance. Suddenly, the building's communication system activated. All personnel, this is orbital control. We have incoming priority transmission from the Hegemony fleet. Admiral Chen touched her communicator. Patch it through down here. High Counselor Vextar's image appeared in the center of the room, his cold gaze sweeping across the assembled Zephyrians. I trust you have reached a decision, Commander Zixathara. Zixathara looked around at her people one final time. She saw fear in their faces, but also something she hadn't seen in 3 centuries: defiance. These people had survived the impossible once. They were ready to dare it again. High Counselor, she said, standing straighter, the Zephyrian people choose to remain with humanity. Vextar's expression didn't change, but something cold and dangerous flickered in his eyes. I see. Then you leave me no choice but to enforce hegemony law. High Counselor, Admiral Chen stepped forward. I strongly advise against any aggressive action. This system is under human protection. Admiral, you are harboring stolen property of the hegemony. We will retrieve what belongs to us by any means necessary. The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Through the windows, they could see human fighter squadrons launching from the orbital platforms, their engines painting brief stars against the dark sky. Elder Kendara approached Zixathara. Commander, have we just started a war? Before Zixathara could answer, another voice joined the conversation. Captain Marcus Webb entered the community center, still wearing his merchant spacer's jacket, but now accompanied by a squad of human marines. Not a war, Elder, he said with a grin. A demonstration. Zixathara felt her heart leap at seeing the man who had started this entire impossible chain of events. Captain Webb, what are you doing here? Admiral Chen asked me to deliver something to the Hegemony fleet, he said, producing a data pad. A message from Earth Central Command. Admiral Chen's communicator crackled to life. Admiral, this is orbital control. The Hegemony ships are demanding immediate surrender of all Zephyrian citizens. Denied. Transmit Captain Webb's message. On the building's main display, they could see the space battle developing overhead. But it wasn't quite a battle. The human ships were moving in perfect formation, not to attack, but to surround the Hegemony vessels. It was a display of overwhelming force without a single shot being fired. The communication system activated again, but this time it was a new voice. Hegemony Battle Group 7, this is Admiral Harrison of the Terran 2nd Fleet. You are outnumbered approximately 40-1. Stand down immediately. Through the viewport, the sky suddenly filled with new stars as hundreds of human ships dropped out of hyperspace. The demonstration of force was so overwhelming that several Zephyrians gasped audibly. High Counselor Vextar's voice came through again, but now it carried a note of uncertainty. This is an illegal act of aggression against hegemony sovereignty. Captain Webb's recorded message began playing on all frequencies. High Counselor, this is Captain Marcus Webb of the Free Trader Odyssey. 3 months ago, I made a promise to the Zephyrian people that they would not be abandoned again. I made that promise in humanity's name, and humanity keeps its promises. The message continued. By order of Earth Central Command, any attempt to remove Zephyrian citizens from human protection will be considered an act of war against the Terran Federation. We have mobilized the 1st, 2nd, I, and 3rd fleets to ensure compliance with this directive. In the community center, the Zephyrians watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded above them. Humanity had mobilized 3 entire fleets to protect 47 refugees. The cost in resources alone was staggering, not even counting the political ramifications. "Commander," Admiral Chen said quietly, "would you like to respond to the High Counselor personally?" Zix Thara stepped forward to the communication panel. "High Counselor, this is Commander Zix Thara of New Zephyr Colony. My people have made their choice freely and without coercion. We stand with humanity not as subjects, but as allies." Vextar's image reappeared, his composed mask finally slipping. "You have no idea what you've done, Zixthara. The hegemony will not forget this insult." "Neither will humanity," Admiral Chen replied. "But the difference is, we won't wait 300 years to act on it." The hegemony ships began withdrawing from the system, outnumbered and outgunned by a margin that made resistance impossible. As they disappeared back into hyperspace, the human fleets maintained their positions, a clear message to the galaxy that this was not a temporary arrangement. Elder Kendara placed her hand on Zixthara's shoulder. "Commander, I have lived through the plague, the abandonment, and the long dying on Kepler 442c. I have seen the worst that the galaxy has to offer. But today, I have seen something I never thought possible, a species that keeps its promises even when keeping them seems impossible." Captain Webb grinned. "Elder, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you see what we can accomplish together." As the immediate crisis passed, the Zephyrians began to understand what they had chosen. Not just safety or survival, but partnership with a species that measured wealth in potential rather than resources. A species that would mobilize 3 fleets to protect 47 refugees simply because it was the right thing to do. Dr. Morrison activated her medical scanners and began taking readings from the assembled Zephyrians. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Your stress indicators have actually improved since the crisis started. Your people don't just survive adversity, you thrive on it." Zixthara smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced in 3 centuries, pride in her people's choice, rather than just their endurance. "Dr. Morrison, I think you're beginning to understand what makes Zephyrians valuable allies rather than just charity cases." "Indeed I am," Dr. Morrison replied, "and I think the galaxy is about to learn the same lesson." As the human fleets settled into permanent patrol patterns around the system and construction crews returned to building a new Zephyrian city, Zixthara reflected on the strange turns of fate. Her people had been saved by a promise made by a single human merchant captain, honored by an admiral who defied galactic law, and protected by fleets that treated 47 refugees as if they were Earth itself. When humanity owed you a favor, they didn't just repay it. They transformed it into something that reshaped the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. And in doing so, they had given the Zephyrians something more precious than survival. They had given them hope that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, no matter how impossible that seemed today.